He is Jeff Van Gundy back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Coach?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm great. Are you in San Antonio already for this one?
Not yet. No,
Okay.
I'll drive down there from Houston a little bit later.
Well, they hear your footsteps, Coach. You know why I know that?
Why?
Because it seems like Popovich is resting his stars tonight, not when ABC's in town tomorrow night. I think he's here. I think he's heard your footsteps. Quite frankly,
I don't think I really factored into that equation.
I don't know. You've been pounding the table quite a bit for some of these broadcasts, and I'm right there with you, by the way. I'm saying you go, Jeff Van Gundy, when you've been pounding the table on that front.
Well, it's a dilemma right now for our league. The quality of play, who fans are paying to see on any given night, from teams that aren't putting their best players on the floor because they want to lose, which is really hearsay in athletics, that you want to lose, that you benefit by losing. And then you've got the other side that's you don't know who's going to play because they want to rest their players for the postseason. If you're a fan, you really have no clue about what product it is you're investing your hard-earned money in.
So when it all comes down to it, what would your fix be? Because I know that the ownership are talking about it at the Board of Governors this very week. What would your fix be?
Well, I would try to get to a game number that everybody can agree that, if healthy, their players are capable of playing in. So I don't care if we reduce it to 60, 65, 70, whatever it is. But there has to be an ownership agreement that, if healthy, we think that is doable and workable. Right now, I think the only thing that the commissioner has at his behest is trying to convince these organizations that if we're partners, true partners between teams and with our fans and with our broadcasting entities who really, they pay the freight, the fans and the broadcast corporations. If we're partners, that means we worry as much about what's good for them as we do for ourselves. And right now, that's not taking place.
Jeff Van Gundy joining me here as he's getting set to call Clippers in San Antonio on ABC tomorrow night. Meanwhile, a star is returning in Kevin Durant, expected to be back with the Warriors on the floor tomorrow night against New Orleans. How do you think Steve Kerr handles the reinsertion of Durant into the jet stream for the Warriors?
Well, I don't think he'll be concerned. You know, I hear a lot of this hand-wringing about, he's going to impact their chemistry. I think they said that before the season as well.
Yes.
And they've been dominant except for that one little stretch. Listen, this is by far the best team in the league. I don't think they'll be challenged, if healthy, very strongly in this playoffs. The way I look at it, it'll take some form of suspension, injury, to allow another team to have a good opportunity to beat the Warriors in a series.
So another Draymond Green, LeBron James type moment? Is that what you're saying? Is the only way that that could tear this team?
Or injury. You know, injury
Sure.
is always possible. But without that, they're just so much more talented than any other team in the league. It's there's some other outstanding teams as we've seen. The records are great, but Golden State, the combination of devastating offensive talent and committed defensive game makes them virtually unbeatable. I think the script's already been written. It's just who they beat along the way.
Jeff Van Gundy joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. What'd you think of Patrick Ewing getting the gig in Georgetown? Huh?
Yeah, really happy. My brother's here in Houston today. They play the Rockets tonight, and he brought me all my Georgetown gear. So I'm already decked out in Hoya gear, and hopefully I'll get to see him to play a lot. You know, he's got a big undertaking. You know, right now DePaul and St. John's and Georgetown are at the bottom. He's got to improve the roster dramatically, and when he does that, I think people will start to understand how good a coach he can possibly be. Because this is someone, Rich, as you talked about before you went to break, he's one of the all-time great players, but I think people sometimes forget he's invested as much time in his second profession of coaching, 15 years being assistant. This isn't something he takes lightly. It's not something he takes for granted. He's going to work extremely hard at getting Georgetown pointed in the right direction again.
Why do you think it took so long for him to get a gig, and that his alma mater was the one to finally do it? Head coaching job, obviously.
Yeah, it's hard to figure how jobs are gotten or lost, however you want to look at it. I know he's interviewed. I know Sacramento he was very close to last year before Dave Yeager got hired. I think there's universal respect for Patrick. I think there is some size bias. I also think there's a little bit of bias by ownership who don't do a deep dive into his background about some of the media perceptions that were driven when he was a player. This is a man who faced so much racism along the way. If you remember back, all the signs that he faced in college. So I think, unfortunately, some of those things have persisted. But let me tell you this, don't underestimate him. I think, people that don't know him may be shocked at his sense of humor, his passion, and certainly he's got a great basketball mind, and he's a very, very bright, loyal man of great, great integrity.
What do you mean by size bias? I think I know what you mean, but how does that manifest itself in a job search?
That, I think that, when we think of the game as far as who would make good coaches that were great players or good players, we tend to think of guards, smaller players. And from an offensive standpoint, they do have control of the game a little bit more, but defensively, your bigs with their ability to read pick-and-roll situations, get teams into coverages, understand schemes. We were so blessed back in New York with the smartest starting front line you could ever hope to have in Patrick Ewing and Charles Oakley. I mean, just brilliant basketball minds that really keyed a great, great defense.
Jeff Van Gundy here on the Rich Eisen Show. Have you spoken to Oakley at all?
Yeah, I do. I speak to Charles. I really enjoy, and I can't say I speak to him, every week or every month, but yeah, we catch up. I love hearing from guys who I coached and that I have such great respect for. And I know right now, people are thinking a lot about, what happened still back in the Garden. I believe it was in February. But my hope is that one unfortunate confrontation leads to understanding and a resolution. Sometimes Bill Parcells used to say this, conflict can clear the air, and hopefully that's what happens between the Knicks and Charles, because Charles is he's one of the great Knicks ever, whether his name ever goes up into the rafters or not. I believe it belongs there. I think Charles set such an example of competitive spirit, intelligence, and toughness. Really, his basketball personality paved the way for those Knicks teams to have great, great defensive mentality and superior toughness.
Well, I got to tell you, Jeff, you're preaching to the choir here, okay? You're talking to a kid from Staten Island, New York, who fell in love with basketball, strolling into Madison Square Garden, watching Rory Sparrow, Michael Ray Richardson, and Red Holtzman at the end of his era. Bernard King was an idol of mine. Loved the Hubie years. Obviously, when Pat Riley came in and what he did with Ewing was spectacular. And then you came in, and you carried on that tradition. And to see Charles Oakley dragged out of that building is disgusting. I don't even know how to handle it. It just gets my blood boiling every time. And to hear that you think his name needs to go on the rafters, I don't know how the current owner, how that happens with the current owner, Coach. Jeff, I just don't know how that happens.
Well, I think again, sometimes when things are boiling under the surface, both parties can, think they're being disrespected. And I think by it coming to the forefront, it was obviously a scene that none of us who love the Knicks and love Charles none of us like that. But hopefully the outcome can be that there can be understanding from both sides. And I'm hopeful that over time and over the summer that there is a time next year where Charles is honored in the middle of Madison Square Garden. I think the fan base there has a special affinity for people and players who are moderately talented and get the most out of their talent, and that was Charles. And I think one day his number will go up because I think cooler heads will prevail. I think everybody, is calming down. I think the situation is going to get resolved. And I hope so because, listen, I was so fortunate. The fans got to see Charles play every day or every game. I got to see him work every day. And this is a man who never took a shortcut, never took a day off, never expected anything, earned everything. And I couldn't be prouder of all he accomplished in the NBA.
Well, I hope if that day comes and I'll take your word for it, I would love it. I would love for those cooler heads to prevail. If that day comes, hopefully they'll do it in a game that you're calling, Jeff, because you deserve to be there for that moment.
Well, even if I'm not calling the game, I will make sure I'm there because, when you talk about Patrick Ewing, I call him the mortgage because he paid the bills for a lot of years for me and a lot of people. And Charles is right along with it. Like those guys, Rich, I think I was the coach. I think I took over when I was maybe 33 or 34, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me respect back when I was an assistant far before I earned it. They taught me more about the NBA. I would include Mark Jackson in that than I taught them. Those guys, they're all about my age, and they are. I'll be forever grateful for them.
Jeff, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. Love having you on. I'd love to get you back right there in the playoffs.
All right. Certainly, Rich.
You got it. It's Jeff Van Gundy.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.